Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast. And I've got a fantastic guest for you, Whitney Elkins-Hutton. She's a returning guest. She was actually on a couple of months ago talking about real estate. She's a real estate investor, very successful, also syndications, also in various other types of real estate investments that we're going to talk about. She has a new book coming out, which she's going to talk about, and I'm really happy to re-welcome her onto the show. Whitney, welcome.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, no, just refresh the audience, who you are. I know you have a story, how you got into real estate, and I'm really excited to dive into the meat of the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So where I'm at today, I am the founder of ashwealth.com. And there I do coaching and mentoring, helping investors grow, get into real estate investing and grow and scale their portfolios. And then I'm also the director of investor education at passiveinvesting.com, where I essentially get to do very much of the same thing. My book, Money for Tomorrow, How to Build and Protect Generational Wealth, is out with bigger pockets now. So everybody can go to their favorite bookstore of choice, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or even bigger pockets and pick that up. But there, really, I just try to help investors understand my path into real estate investing, but not so much so you can follow my path, but learn from all my mistakes and the mistakes of others that I learned from. And so that book it really lays out a nice blueprint. First, understand what generational wealth is. Two, what are the rules around creating wealth? Three, what are all the strategies that we need to have in place to create wealth, keep wealth, grow wealth, and then pass it on? And we don't get into the clickbaity headlines or the newest and hottest deal strategy that's out there, but really going back to the strategies that the 1% use. And so these are lessons that I had to learn along my investment journey. I started off in 2002 completely by accident, bought a house with a significant other. Month later, the relationship falls apart. I think the house is going to sink me. So I stuff it full of roommates, finish the rehab on the house and sell it 11 months later and made a $52,000 profit. And oh, by the way, I hadn't been planning for any of my housing expenses. And I was like, wait a second, hold on. I think I'm onto something here. This is back in 2002. I was working with the CDC as an epidemiologist and doing the facilitation and training post 9/11 for smallpox, anthrax, helping public health physicians and nurses identify biological, radiological, and chemical events.
Yeah.
And long story short, that had me working, 60, 70, 80 hours a week on the road quite a bit. But here I made just almost just as much money in flipping one piece of real estate as I did in my day job. And so while I loved what I did for my day job, I was like, this is what's going to get me financially free.
Mm.
So did several more live-in flips of my own, eventually started hanging on to those flips and putting renters into them and scaled to over 36 units, single family rental, got into multifamily investing, both actively, my husband and I, and then eventually in a joint partnership, and then started syndicating deals with two additional partners. And then we hit another ceiling of achievement. We had a baby girl and I wanted my time
Wow.
back. And you get into real estate to get your time back, or that's like the evolution. And here we were heavy into real estate and didn't have our time back. And that's where we found passive investing, just investing in other operators' deals. And we scaled over 800 million in real estate currently. That's in our active portfolio. Passively, much larger than that, but hold over 6,500 residential units, 2,200 self-storage units, 15 express car washes, and a myriad of other cash flowing businesses.
Yeah. Wow. Really fit. I love this story. You have your experience in just the very basics of owning property all the way to syndication, and this very congratulations. And I love this community because I see on social media you're at conferences with just so many influencers and still networking even in a downturn. And talk about like real estate market in general. I know this year's kind of struggle. I know some sectors have really done commercials struggling, interest rate decisions a couple days away. And talk about like where the market is and how like interest rates and also possibly a new administration will affect the industry or where
Oh
you
my
see.
gosh, so much to unpack there. I'll work backwards. As far as me, as far as what do I think how do I think the election's going to impact real estate? I don't think there's going to be any immediate impacts. I think that'll be time tested through Congress and stuff like that. A lot of people are like, what do you think about the president? I'm like, I don't. I really don't. I look more at who is being elected at the local level of government and at the state level of government where I want to invest. I think that's more impactful when it comes down to, is this still a good market to invest in? Is it what's going to happen to the tax structure? How is this going to impact resources? How are we going to attract a population coming in here? What is it going to do to job growth? At the federal level, trust me, I'm following it, but I'm very much less. And I watch very much at the local level because real estate is local.
Mm,
Okay. Now, at the federal level, we're going to see potentially some sort of tax package. Honestly, I think it's going to impact probably people that holds millions and millions of net worth and above, not so much me as the core investor. So again, I keep my eye on it, but I really came back. These things take a long time to suss out. And to be quite honest, people promise a lot whenever they're running. But then whenever they get elected, now they've got to work with the other side.
yeah.
And now you still have to have some sort of bipartisan agreements that happen here. Things are going to look very different between now and then, like when things actually comes down to execution.
Yeah.
Now, that said, what do I think about the market cycle? Now, that I think is very important for all investors to understand. There's really 4 phases of the market cycle. And I think what's unique about the current market cycle that we're in, some will say we're in the hyper supply into the recessionary environment. Most people that have been investing in private equity real estate have never invested through the hyper supply and recessionary parts of the cycle.
Mm,
Okay. Because if you think about it, syndication and private investments really opened up to the retail investor 2012 legislation. So it really didn't get going until 2014. So everybody had a nice bull run up, like in the recovery phase from the Great Recession into hyper growth. So this is new, untested, and uncharted waters. People have been investing for real estate for millennia, so we understand that these cycles happen, that there's going to be hyper supply, retraction through a recession. So I encourage investors to look at what the market is giving you.
mhm,
Right now, when we have the recovery and growth, we've got a lot of money being infused into the system. Equity investments tend to be really good to take a look at. But when we hit the hypersupply into the recessionary part of the market cycle, debt or capital gets sucked out of the system. Okay, we see this retraction. And that's what's been happening. That's when you, as the investor, get to solve some really cool problems and you can step in and be offer debt to other investors and potentially continue to share in the profits of the deal. So that is how I think through this right now. Now, that said, we had the different parts of the market cycle overlaid with a huge run up of interest rates, the largest and quickest run of interest rates that we've seen since the 1970s. And that's been a really hard pill to swallow. Like the old saying, when the tide goes out, you figure out who's swimming naked. The tide's gone out, and we have seen those operators that really had no business sense and could not adjust to the market.
mm,
Nearly everybody was affected. Okay. And it boils down to a question is, were they able to make the tough decisions on maybe selling an asset to break even on it or infusing capital into an asset in order to save it, working with banks did they have good lending partners? Then you had other operators that just unfortunately were new to the space, didn't have somebody on their team that knew how to work through these business cycles, these market cycles.
mm,
And of course, unfortunately, people have lost money.
mhm,
However, this is how the silver lining, an investor entering into the market today that's interested in passive investing, you now have seen an operator that has gone through COVID, probably some sort of weather related event, be it a hurricane, tornado, major storm, heck, even a power grid going down in Texas. It's been through some sort of weather related event, bump in the road, and been through the interest rate cycle. If they're still standing, dig in deeper and learn to see if they might be a good partner for you.
yeah, really fascinating because in today's because real estate, especially for the audience, doctors, lawyers, it's always been that tried and true, just put your money there, storage of wealth. The other question I have for you is your thoughts because you invest in self storage, and I know, for example, like data centers with the booming AI that's booming. And so, which sectors are doing well? Which ones are struggling? Which ones are poised to do well in 2025 and beyond? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I break it down when I look at my portfolio. I want to have the core of my portfolio and an asset that everybody needs. That is a roof over their head. Okay. Then I look outward from there. I'm like, okay. So then if everybody needs a roof over their head, maybe that means multifamily, that maybe means mobile home parks, heck, even residential assisted living as we have an aging population. Okay. Then what does everybody need past that? We're Americans. And yes, we're Americans. And then we're Americans. We're very attached to our belongings. And that's where self storage can be a logical next addition to the portfolio, and even maybe investing in express car washes because we love our cars too. We love taking care of our cars. It's more advantageous for somebody to keep their car very well maintained right now, which includes washing it as opposed to getting a new loan. That said, each part of these market cycles they're going to cycle a little bit differently. So what do I mean by that? Self storage. Right now, we had this great migration that happened like in 2020 and 2021. A lot of people were shuffling around. They were like, hey, I don't have to be in the office anymore. I can do my New York City job living in Idaho. That migration has slowed down.
Mhm.
Okay. So we're seeing less utilization of self storage. Those parts of the market are softening a little bit right now.
Mhm.
You really want to take care to make sure that you're not going into a market that has oversupply and has been overbuilt. Similar things have happened with multifamily too. We saw a lot of shuffling going around, a lot of projects being overbuilt in certain areas, and we have to wait for that absorption to occur, which in most markets should occur into 2024 into early parts of 2025. So the adage has been survive to 2025. It's probably more like survive to like mid or late 2025. So now you brought up data centers. That's like AI is not something that I'm watching. I think that's going to be really interesting. I'm actually more interested in us onshoring, reshoring back jobs, manufacturing jobs. So I'm really looking at where are the chip centers going into North Texas. Where is Amazon expanding? Where is a lot of this industrial manufacturing and reshoring of jobs occurring? Like Greenville, South Carolina has been huge for manufacturing. So I'm looking at these trends. So I still think, and those trends are great for the primary industry, maybe industrial unit. They're also great for the secondary, needs, which that person, you're going to have more jobs in that area. You need more housing,
Right.
right? And so we're still under position. If you look at the basic fundamental, we're still underbuilt 3.3 to 10 million units. It really depends on who you're listening to. Realtor.com says 7.2 million units need to be built. Now, that's not across the entire United States. That's where the population has moved to. So we need to, we need to get ahead of that, of that trend. And those would be good markets to invest in.
Yeah, really fascinating. I want to, because we have around 7, 8 minutes left, and I know I wanted to give you a chance because car washes. I had a recent guest talk about investing in laundromats, which was really interesting, and then talk about your book and what are appetites, how could people find it, and we'll progress from there.
Yeah, you can find the book on Amazon.com, biggerpockets.com, really any major book reseller of choice. The book, the original framework of the book were my notes for my daughter on how to steward our portfolio should something happen for me.
Mm,
I didn't want her to have to struggle and piece it all together. I wanted her to be able to like learn these lessons, essentially hand her like a little instruction manual. Hey, this is like what it means to build wealth. These are all the rules on how money works. These are the tried and true strategies that the 1% in the world use in order to scale their wealth, build and scale their wealth. And oh, by the way, protect it and pass it on. Okay. I think investors are like really gung ho about making money and growing money that they forget that they have to know how to keep it and know how to pass it on.
mm.
And so I wanted her to have this like little instruction manual. Okay. I intend to be around for a really long time, but hey, maybe the universe has a different plan for me. And I wanted her to also learn from my mistakes. Now, the thing is, I gave a presentation at a Bigger Pockets conference a couple years ago, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, we don't have a book like this. Would you like to write a book?" And a friend of mine just elbowed me and said, "Yes, she will." And I'm like, "I'm writing a book? Okay, that's gonna be amazing." So it's meant to be a journey. So any investor could pick it up and read the entire book and either go, "Okay, cool. I got these foundational things in place. Check. But I don't have these other things in place, or I haven't been looking about at scaling my investments in a conservative, truly conservative, safe manner." So somebody might pick it up and they'll go, "Holy smokes, this is the whole game plan. Thank you so much." Another investor might pick it up and went, "Oh, I don't have a tracking spreadsheet for my portfolio. And I don't actually track my new investment before I actually make the investment to understand how it's going to shift my portfolio. Okay, let me go back and put this foundational skill in place. That way I can truly execute on growing my wealth." So it's meant to be designed for any investor, like a choose your own adventure where you come in.
Really interesting. And I'm going to check out the book as well on Amazon. And for the audience, these Whitney's resources will be in the links. Lastly, I just my thoughts because you seem to be ahead in thinking and you have your cores. One thing that's the industry, the real estate industry has gone through a massive shifts that you mentioned COVID and work from home. Recently, like the NAR, they reach a settlement. Now brokers commissions are like basically they have to take a 50% pay cut. And also now we have like things like blockchain and tokenized real estate. And how do you envision these? I know this is I've always thought about this and I wanted to ask investors what are their thoughts.
As far as how's the real estate industry going to evolve?
Yeah. For example, with blockchain and basically tokenizing transactions, title insurance, banks, all of these things, financing will be a lot faster. But I'm just curious if it's just somebody from the inside's perspective.
Yeah, I think if you look at it from a bell curve perspective, like majority 60% of the transactions are going to continue to progress with more technology layered onto them. But is the industry going to change overnight where we're all doing transactions in Bitcoin and on the blockchain? No. My in-laws don't even know what Bitcoin is. Every time I try to bring it up and they're like, their head goes, "Oh my gosh, I can see it like possibly about to explode." We're gonna still make these gradual push forward. I
Yeah.
do see, especially in the real estate industry, AI being used quite a bit in three ways, two of which are like a little scary for me. One, the cool thing is that AI is being used to like kind of source and do underwriting and due diligence on deals. I think that's great if you're feeding it the right metrics. I think it can be used as an ancillary tool, but not in replacement of good judgment decision. There's no way an AI can say the east side of town. I live in Boulder, Colorado. Like the different sides of town, you go 2 blocks one way. It's not dangerous. Like we're not in the middle of New Orleans or anything like that. But it's a very different market across my street than it is where I am. AI is not going to know that. Okay. So you still have to have a human perspective. The two things that I see where it's going to possibly be slightly dangerous and it's rolled into one is how people get information. Okay. So you still have to be very discerning on looking at articles, looking at what a thought influencer is putting out there, because more and more influencers are using these tools to create content, create opinions. And you still want to level set that against other data sets, like what's being put out by NAR or maybe Marcus and Millichamp, right? Like we still want to economists. So you still want to follow multiple channels. I see a lot of retail investors that are starting to lean more into artificial intelligence to analyze their own portfolios. I decided to test this the other week with my portfolio. I was like, really? Can you do this? Because it's a language learning model. I discovered that it couldn't do some basic calculations correctly. I had it compare, should I pay off my house quicker or should I take the money and invest? And it was miscalculating amortization tables.
Uh,
Just so it's just not there yet.
mhm.
So while I think in the future we're going to have a disruption, a lot of people think that disruption is happening now. No, you need to be very discerning because there's a lot of data that AI is spitting out that is just completely wrong.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. It reminds me because Zillow, Redfin, Airbnb, all these platforms, they leverage data, and it's really helped. And it's quite interesting to hear insiders' perspective. It seems everything's trying to make things faster, more efficient. I remember having to like just send in all these documents and just wait, is it approved or not? It's just so tedious. But with new technology, you'll be able to do things faster. So I really enjoyed having you on for a second time and talking this current real estate trends, and really timely. And thanks for so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.